Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Samach Aleph, Daf 61 of Masechta Yevamos. Friends, who could tell me what Daf 61? Who could tell me what Daf 61 talks about? Well, I think relatively interesting stuff. Why not? Like Kohen Gadol kind of stuff, and then at the end get to a world famous machlokas. Bishami Basil, but how to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Puravu. Like how many kids are you yotzei the mitzvah with? Alright. Let us get started. We are on Daf Samach Amud Beis, all the way at the bottom of the page, all the way to the end of the page. Tanya, who's taught in the Brisa. Reb Shimon ben Yochai would say, Kive of the Kochavim, that the graves of idol worshippers Einu mitamin be'oil are not mitame tumas oihel. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ve'atein tzon nitzon marisi, you are my sheep, the sheep that I shepherd. Odom atem, you are considered Adam. Atem krim Adam. Of the Kochavim Kurim Adam, you are called Adam. The of the Kochavim are not called Adam, and of course the pasuk says Adam Kiyamos ba'oil. That when an Adam dies in an oil, so then he's mitame tumas oil. So therefore, it's dafka. Somebody who's considered Adam is mitame tumas oil. Adam atem ve'ein ha'ovdei Kochavim Kurim atem. Adam. Meisvei v'taka avakasha v'nefesh Adam shisha asur. Elef. It says by Midyan that the Adam, that there was 16 Shisha Asar, 16 Elef is 1,000, 16,000 Adam, and that was by Midyan. They were Ovdei Kochavim Mishum Behema. Well, because they also mentioned that they were Behemas Darton, and therefore, Kilu, in contrast to the Behemas, they're Adam. But on their own, they would not be referred to as Adam. Asher ish b'hai b'mishtem eser ribo Adam, Asher li Adam in Yemino l'smalo. It says by Ninveh. Who could tell me what Ninveh is? We read about Ninveh at Mincha on Yom Kippur. We read about Ninveh in Mafter Yoina. My great uncle, he always used to get Mafter Yoina at the White Shul in Farakwe. Uncle Sherman. He was a nice guy. To me at least. Well, to us. Uncle Sherman. Good man. Okay. Uncle Pon. So, right. So it says in Ninveh, by Ninveh, and they were, the people of Ninveh, Lamaise, were of the Kochavim. And it says by them, that it says over there that there was more than 12,000 Adam. So how come it says Adam if they're of the Kochavim? Mishum Behema. Because also in that pasuk it lists the Behemoths, and therefore, also in contrast to the Behemoths, they were referred to Adam, but they would not be referred to as Adam on their own. Now the Gemara asks, but 1 second, it says, also by Midyan, when they fought with Midyan, so it says that anybody who killed a person in the battle, so they have to become tahor. And the question is, why would they have to become tahor if they were fighting against Ovdei Kochavim? Du me'iktu chad misrael. So Reb Shimon ben Yochai explains that, well, if one of the Yidden got killed, so then you'd become tummy to them, but you wouldn't become tummy to the the rabbis who argue on Reb Shimon ben Yochai and who say that of the Kochavim are mitami ba'oil. So V'Rabbanan, they respond to Reb Shimon ben Yochai and they say lo nifkad mimenu ish, but it says that none of the Yidden got killed. And therefore, how could it be, Reb Shimon, that you're explaining that they had to purify themselves because maybe a Yid got killed? The pasuk b'feish said, Lo nifkad mimenu ish. Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Lo nifkad mimenu ish la'aver. No, it means that nobody did any aver that they weren't supposed to do, but some of the Yidden may have unfortunately gone to Wellwood in the fighting. Ravina Amar says, Ravina nehidim dima'atinu kra me'atmuye ba'oil. Adam Kiyamos ba'oil mimago umasa mimuatinu kra. Oh, so says Ravina that no, even if the Ovdei Kochavim are not mitami tumas ha'oil, right? Meaning if they're in like a tent or a house or something, so then by an ovdei kochavim, so not everything in the house will become tamei, which is what's tumas ha'oil. And that only applies to the yidden. But there are other kinds of tumah, of course. If you touch a corpse, right, so then you could become tummy. So says Ravina, that applies to ovdei kochavim oichet. And therefore, you can explain by midyam, when it says that anybody who may have touched a corpse needs to become tahor, so that could even be touching the corpse of one of the Midianites. Because, right, that wouldn't be tumas oil, that would be tumas mago masa, which Ravina says would apply to the ovdei kochavim as well. Says the Mishnah, Eris is amone. If a kohen betrothed a widow, okay, V'nisman lios kohen gadol. Oh, didn't see that coming. And then he gets appointed to be the kohen gadol. So now what does he do? So on the one hand, he betrothed a widow, and when he was a regular kohen, but he didn't yet do nisuin, and now he's the kohen gadol. So can he go weiter? Can he do nisuin with this almana who he betrothed before he became kohen gadol? Yichnos. Sure, no problem. You can do nisuin. Umayse bi Yoshua ben Gamla. There was a story with Yoshua ben Gamla, Shekidesh as Marta bas Baisus, that he betrothed Marta bas Baisus, Umino Amelech Lios Kohen Gadol, V'chonsa. And the king, Yanai Hamelech, then appointed Yoshua ben Gamla to be the Kohen Gadol, and he continued, and he did Nisuin with Marta bas Baisus even after he was the Kohen Gadol. So he betrothed Marta bas Baisus when he was a regular Kohen, and then they appointed him to be the Kohen Gadol, and then he then did Nisuin with Marta bas Baisus after that. And I guess that she must have been an almana then. I didn't think of that. I guess she must have been an almana. I guess that's kind of the point, right? I assume. Isn't that the point? Probably. I assume that's the point. Who is Marta bas Baisus? Marta bas Baisus was one of the wealthy women in Jerusalem. And, okay, fine. Shomeres Yovam. Right. Okay, fine. I think the Gemara in Gittin talks about it, right? Alright. Fine. Shomeres Yovam shenafel ifnei kohen hedget. So what if you have a kohen and his brother dies and he has to do yibum? But he hasn't yet done yibum. When Ismail is kohen gadol, then he's appointed to be the kohen gadol. Afapisha also by maimer, lo yichnos. Even though he's already done maimer, still, if he didn't yet do yibum, so then if he's appointed to be kohen gadol, so then he cannot do yibum once he's been made kohen gadol, even if he had already done maimer. Says the Gemara, how do we know that if you have a kohen who betrothed a widow and then he was appointed to be kohen gadol, so how do you know that he's allowed to go weiter and to do nisuin? Tamalomer yikach isha. It says that he will take a woman, and the word isha is extra to teach that to include a situation where a regular kohen betrothed a almone, and then he was appointed to be kohen gadol, so he can go weiter and he could do nisuin. So why don't we say the same thing by a shomeres yovam? That if you have a kohen who is a shomeres yovam, right? I mean, he has to do he had to do even with his brother's widow, and then he becomes kohen gadol. Let's say he can go weiter oichet. So isha v'lo yevama. The pasuk says isha, not yevama. Right? It says yikach isha, not yevama. Ma'aseh bi Yoshua v'chulei. There was a story with Yoshua ben Gamla and Marta bas Baisus. In fact, the Gemara, in this manner lo. 1 second. The Gemara, right? The Mishnah says, what does the Mishnah say? It says, Eris es almana v'nismana lios kohen gadol. Yichnos. So Ma'aseh bi Yoshua ben Gamla shekidesh es Marta bas Baisus umino. The first part said, right, in the ratio of the Mishnah, it says Vinismana, he was appointed. But in the second part of the Mishnah, it says that they appointed him. Kilu. In the first part, the implication is that it was out of his own merit. Whereas by Yoshua ben Gamla, it sounds like he didn't become Kohen Gadol out of his own merit. Rather, some kind of external authority decided politically that he was going to be king. Rav Yosef says, Rav Yosef, I see over here a knot of nudniks. To Amr Ravasi says Ravasi, Tarkava de Dinre, Ayla, Le Marta Bas Baisus, Liane Malko, Ademuki Le Leoshua Ben Gamla, Bechani Raviva. That Marta Bas Baisus paid, was it 2 kavs? A lot of money to King Yanai, so that Yanai Amelech would appoint Yoshua Ben Gamla to be the Kohen Gadol. So yes, it's true. Yoshua Ben Gamla was not Kohen Gadol out of his own merit. He was Kohen Gadol because he was engaged to Marta Bas Baisus, who was very wealthy, and she gave a donation to Yanai Amelech, who then pulled some strings to make him the Kohen Gadol. Says the Mishnah, Kohen Gadol shemeis achiv cholitz lo miyabim. If you have a Kohen Gadol, and unfortunately his brother goes to Wellwood, and there's no kids and there's a widow, so the Kohen Gadol does not do yibum, he does chalitza. Again, Kohen Gadol shemeis. I'm reading again. Kohen Gadol shemeis achiv. That if you have a Kohen Gadol whose brother goes to Wellwood, cholitz v'lo miyabim. So the Kohen Gadol does chalitza. He does not do yibum. Says the Gemara, Kapasuk v'tani loshna min erisin v'loshna min anisuin. Oh, friends, you got the kasha, right? That it says that the Mishnah simply says that a Kohen Gadol, that his brother dies, he does chalitza, he doesn't do yibum. We're not differentiating here between if his brother was engaged to the woman who's now his widow, or was he married, right? Or let's say this, were they engaged or were they married? Okay, I understand why if the brother was married, so right, if they were married, I understand why the Kohen Gadol would not do yibum, because esei v'lo saisu, because yibum is an esei, Yevamos yovei aleo, and if his brother was married, so then it's an esei and a lo saise. It's besula yikach, right? That a Kohen Gadol needs to dafka marry besula, and she's not a besula because she was already married. And also it's that almone lo yikach, right? That also do not marry an almone, right? So there's an essay and a lo saise, and therefore the essay of Yevamos yovei aleo will not be doche the lo saise and the essay of almone lo yikach and besula yikach, which implies that not a beula and she's a beula. Fine. Ve'ein essay doche le saise v'essay, right? Okay, as it just said, an essay is not doche lo saise in an essay. Elo mina erisin yovei essay v'yitches lo saise. Friends, you get the kasha? But what if they were only engaged? So if they're only engaged, then the assumption is that she's still a besula. In which case, there's no essay that he's violating by marrying her, by doing yibum with her. There's the lo saise of almona lo yikach, that he can't marry an almona, but let the essay of Yevamos yovei aleo come and be doche, overpower the lo saise of almona lo yikach. And for the Gemara, gezer bi rishona to be a shnir. Well, enochinami, maybe the first time that they have intercourse, so that would be okay, because it's the mitzvah of yibum. But what about the second time? It's no longer the mitzvah of yibum. All it is almana lo yikach. So therefore we say just stay out of it. Do chalitza. Says the Mishnah, kohen hedjit lo yisa ilonis, that a regular kohen should not marry an ilonis. An ilonis is a girl who's physically unable to have children. Ela imkein yesh lo isha uvanim, only if he already has a wife and children. Rashi points out, and as the Gemara is going to ask, this isn't, what does it have to do with a kohen, right? Shouldn't this really be shaykh to anybody, right? If any man has a mitzvah of puravu, so then how can he marry an ilonis who's unable to have children unless, right, how is he going to have children? So, okay, fine. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda afal pishi yesh lo isha uvanim, says Rabbi Yehuda, look, even if he has a wife and children, still lo yisa ilonis, a kohen, specifically a kohen, cannot marry an Ilonis. She's Zona Amur Batorah, because that would be Zinus, right? Meaning she's unable to have children. So then, if she's asleep, if he's sleeping with this fellow, or if she's sleeping with him, whatever it is, it says Rabbi Yehuda that it would be considered znus, and a kohen is not allowed to marry a zona. So therefore, says Rabbi Yehuda that the Gemara is going to explain exactly what this means. But it says Rabbi Yehuda that a kohen cannot marry an ilonis even if he already fulfilled the mitzvah of Pur Revu. It says the Chachamim that a zona would not include an ilonis. A zona would be a convert, a Canaanite slave maidservant who is freed, or somebody who slept with somebody that they're not allowed to sleep with. In those cases, it would be considered zinus, but not by an ilonis. Therefore, the Chachamim say that a kohen would be able to marry an ilonis if he was already mekayim the mitzvah of pru or revu. Says the Gemara, the exilarch said to Rav Huna, my taima, how come the Mishnah is saying that a kohen hedjit cannot marry an ilonis? The Tanna Kama is saying a kohen hedjit cannot marry an ilonis unless he already has a wife and children. So mishum period v'rivya. Why? Because we're concerned about how's he going to be mekayim the mitzvah pru revu. I don't understand. What does that have to do with being a kohen? Any regular Yisrael as well. Any regular kohen, any regular Yisrael as well has the mitzvah of pru revu. So says the Reish Galusa, I don't understand. What does that do with the kohen? Any regular yid should be unable to marry an ilonis if he knows that they're not going to be able to have children together, and he has not yet been mekayim the mitzvah of pru revu. So Amrle, so Rav Huna responds to the exilarch, Mishum, the Kabbalah Misnei Seifa, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Afal Pi sheyesh lo isha, v'yesh lo banim lo yisa ilonis, sheizona amur batorah. That Rav Huna answers well, because the next part of the Mishnah says, Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda Afal Pi sheyesh lo isha uvanim v'yesh lo banim. Even if the kohen already has a wife and he already has children, lo yisa ilonis, still says Rabbi Yehuda should not marry an ilonis. She's zona amur b'torah, because Rabbi Yehuda considers her to be a zona. The azona kohanim udemafkadei v'Yisrael amafkadei, and the prohibition against marrying a zona is something that's specific to kohanim. Mishumachi katani kohen. That's why we specify the kohen in the reisha, even though yes, it applies to all yidden. But because the next part of the Mishnah Dafka is shaykh to kohanim, so the reisha also we mentioned kohanim. Amar Rav Huna says, Rav Huna, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. How come Rabbi Yehuda says that an ilonis would be considered a zona? Dichsiv, as the pasuk says, achlu v'lo yizbo, that they will eat and not be satisfied. Hiznu v'lo yifrotzu, they will have znus and they will not proliferate. Kol bia she'ein ba pirza eina ela bila znus. Any intercourse that does not have proliferation, so it would be considered znus according to Rabbi Yehuda, and that is why a kohen cannot marry an ilonis even if he was already mekayim the mitzvah of pru revu. Tanya, so now we talk a little in a brayse. You ready for this brayse? Rabbi Eliezer Omer kohen lo yisas aktana. That's the brayse. Rabbi Eliezer says that a kohen should not marry a ketana. Omer Rav Chizde l'Rabba. So now Rav Chizde says to Rabba, pok ayin bo, go and wait, let me think for a second. Okay. So Rav Chizde says to Rabba, poke ayin bo, go and study this brisa, get to the depth of this brisa, de l'orta barila Rav Huna minach, because at night, in the evening, Rav Huna is going to ask you about this brisa. You know what that means? Rabba had to go out and explain this brisa because he was going to get a faher from Rav Huna later. You don't want to show up unprepared for that faher. Nafak ayin ba. And so Rabba went out and he analyzed this brisa and he said, Rabbi Eliezer savela krib Meir v'savela krib Yehuda. That this is how you understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion, which is that a kohen cannot marry a ketana because he holds like Reb Meir and he holds like Reb Yehuda. Savela krib Meir the chayish l'miuta v'savela krib Yehuda the Omer Ailonis zona havya. That let's do that again. Savela krib Meir the chayish l'miuta, that he holds like Reb Meir, who's concerned about miuta, how do you say, minorities, exceptions to the rules. Kilu, chances are that this katana will not end up being an ilonis, right? That's not, I imagine it's not very common. So, meaning we're saying that the concern is that what if, let's back up a second. Rabbi Eliezer is saying that a Kohen cannot marry a katana. The question is why? So, Rabbi wants to argue that the reason why is because, well, right now she's a katana. What if when she gets older, it turns out she's an ilonis? Sure, that's not the majority of women, but who knows? And therefore, says Rabbi wants to explain that Rabbi Eliezer holds in the same way that Rabbi Meir holds, which is chayish l'miuta, that he's concerned about, in some situations, she may end up being an ilonis. V'savlik Rabbi Yehuda, dom ilonis zona havya. And Rabbi Eliezer also holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that an ilonis is considered a zona, and a Kohen cannot marry an ilonis, cannot marry a zona, and therefore cannot marry an ilonis. So, therefore, Rabbi says, Rabbi Eliezer holds that we have to be concerned that maybe she'll end up being an ilonis, like Reb Meir, and also, if she then is an ilonis, this Kohen would not be allowed to be married to her, like Rabbi Yehuda. But one second. Can Rabbi Eliezer really hold like Reb Meir that he's concerned about the miut? Ve'otanya. But we learn in the Brisa, Kohen v'ktana lo chotzim v'lo miyabin divrei Meir. Reb Meir says that a katan and a ktana, they do not do chalitza, they do not do yibum. Amulo li Reb Meir, they said to Reb Meir, Yofe Omar Chein Chotzin. I understand why you could say that a katan or a ktana are unable to do chalitza. Ish ksid b'parsha. It says by chalitza ish. What does the pasuk say? Okay, so etc. So it says ish, an adult, not a katan. And we compare isha to ish, and therefore if by chalitza he has to be a man, so she also has to be a woman. They cannot be katanas. Okay, so the Gemara says, I understand why Reb Meir would say that a katan or a katana do not do chalitza. Elamai taima in miyavmin. But how come the katan and the katana would not do yibum? Omerle. So Reb Meir responds, or Omerlehu, he responds to them, katan shema yimotze saris, katana shema timotze elonis. Well, what if the katan ends up being a saris, a fellow who's unable to sire children? I think that's like a thing. And a katana, what if she's an ilonis? So we see v'nim tzu pogim be'erva, and then it would turn out to be erva. So what do we see? So we see that Reb Meir is choshesh l'miut v'tanya, and we also learn in a brisa ktana misyabemes ve'ena choletzes div Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says that davka ktana should do yibum, not chalitza. So clearly Rabbi Eliezer does not hold like Reb Meir. Reb Meir says you have to be concerned that maybe he'll be a saris, maybe she'll be an ilonis. Rabbi Eliezer does not seem to be concerned. So therefore, how could Rabbi be saying that Rabbi Eliezer holds like Reb Meir? Rabbi Eliezer argues with Reb Meir. And Rabbi Eliezer is not choshesh l'miut. And can it be that Rabbi Eliezer holds like Rabbi Yehuda that an ilonis is a zona? But we learn in the Brisa, zona kishmar div Rabbi Eliezer. That we're going to have all sorts of definitions of a zona. Says Rabbi Eliezer, a zona is a married woman who has relationships that she's not allowed to be having. Rabbi Akiva Omer zona zo mufkeres. Rabbi Akiva says that a zona is a woman, even if she's single, even if she's not married, but she's sleeping with lots of different people, and that would be considered a zona. Reb Masi ben Chorish Omer says, Reb Masi ben Chorish, afilu halach pail ashkoso v'aleh baderech asa zona. Says Reb Masi ben Chorish that even if you have a married couple, but it's a sota situation, the husband warned her, don't be with so-and-so, and she secluded herself with so-and-so, and now they're not allowed to be together now until they clear things up with the sota potion, and then on the way to Yerushalayim, they sleep with each other. Now, they're not allowed to, that's a forbidden relationship, so even a husband and wife could theoretically make a zona. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda zona zo ilonis. Rabbi Yehuda says that a zona is an ilonis. So, we already see that Rabbi Eliezer says that a zona is a married woman who has a relationship that she's not allowed to have. And Rabbi Yehuda says a zona is an ilonis. which means that clearly Rabbi Eliezer has a different definition than Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer has a different definition than Rabbi Yehuda has. The Chacham say in Zona Eligios Mishcheres Vishnivla Bilas Nus. Chacham say that a Zona is a convert or a Canaanite maidservant, right, who may have had relationships with of the Kochavim, Vishnivla Bilas Nus, or that any woman who has a relationship that she's not allowed to have. Rabbi Lazar says, Rabbi Lazar, says Rabbi Lazar, that an unmarried man who sleeps with an unmarried woman, so she becomes a zona. No, so what do we see? So we see that, what do we see? So we see that clearly Rabbi Eliezer cannot hold like Rabbi Yehuda. So then how do we understand Rabbi Eliezer's opinion? Amar Ravada bar Ahava says, Ravada bar Ahava acha b'choyin gadol askinan. When Rabbi Eliezer says that a kohen cannot marry a ketana, it means a kohen gadol cannot marry a ketana. Le'emas konila, because when would he actually be kohen? L'chi gadla, b'ulahi. Ravada bar Ahava wants to argue, untruly, but he wants to argue that, you can't actually marry a ketana midoraisa. So when would the kohen gadol technically be marrying her? When she gets older. But once she gets older, she's going to already be a be'ula, because they've already been married for a long time. Rava says, it destroys the mind. Or as some not nice people, there was a fellow in the Ruby on Rails community. He was like one of like the celebrity Ruby on Rails guys. Anyways, I was never so into him. Not really. But anyways, he once commented on somebody's code that it makes his eyes bleed. Why does somebody's code make your eyes bleed? He was just being a nudnik, I think. But anyways, he got a lot of backlash about it. So then, after all the backlash, he did tshuva. Well, at least on some level, he told people he was sorry so that people would keep buying his books. So Rav is saying, Mechale Lev, he's saying eyes bleed. Although he's focusing, it says his heart hurts, but the article defined it as destroyer of the mind. Basically, Rava says, Mapitom, if her father betrothed her to the Kohen Gadol, so then that's Mida Oraisa. He's married to her as a Katana. And if she was Mekadosh herself, so Rabbi Eliezer, what then? Only Rabbi Eliezer would say that the Kohen Gadol is not allowed to marry a Katana who's marrying herself off as a Katana. Obviously, that can happen because they're not actually being married, and they'd only get married once they're Gedola, when she's a Gedola, and then that she would be a Be'ula already. Rather says Rav L'olam b'choyin hedjit. No, so really it's talking about a regular Kohen. Rabbi Eliezer says that a regular Kohen cannot marry a Katana. V'chashin and Shemet Tispata Olav, we're concerned that, since she's a Katana, what happens if she gets seduced, and then they won't be able to remain together? Yoch Yisrael Nami. But if so, then also Yisrael, right? Meaning, if you have a Yisrael, you have a married couple, and he's a Yisrael, and then if she gets raped, then they could stay married, right, against her will. But even if she was raped against her will, so then they could remain married. But if she was seduced and it was consensual, so then they cannot remain together. So now, we want to say that if she was, right, so meaning even a Yisrael cannot stay together. When it comes to a Kohen, even if it was against her will, they cannot stay together. But now, even a Yisrael, if it was consensual, so then they cannot stay together. So Yachi Yisrael Nami, so if we're concerned that maybe she's going to get seduced, but then shouldn't that be by Yisrael as well? Pitui Ketana Onesu, the seduction of a Ketana is considered onus, for onus by Yisrael Mishra Sharia, and onus is allowed by Yisrael, but not by a Kohen. That's why we're saying that a Kohen cannot marry a Ketana, because she may get seduced. Rav Papa Omer says, Rav Papa B'choyin Gadol, says Rav Papa that no, it is actually talking about, what did I just say? So Rav said it's talking about a regular Kohen, right? So Rav said it's talking about a regular Kohen, but we're concerned that, since she's a Ketana, she might get seduced, and then, they will not be able to remain together. Rav Papa Amar b'Kohen Gadol. Rav Papa says no, it is talking about a Kohen Gadol. V'hai Tana hu Tanya, and it's like the following Tana who teaches Besula Yachol Ketana Tamlom or Isha, right? That when it says that a Kohen Gadol needs to marry Besula, Is it possible that he can marry a katana? Therefore it says Isha. Yochel Bulgaris. Could it be that he can marry a Bulgaris? Tamloma Besula. Therefore it says no, Besula, and I guess assuming that Besula excludes Bulgaris. So basically he has to marry a Nara. Right? He can't marry a katana because it says Isha, and he can't marry a Bulgaris because it says Besula, so he has to marry a Kitana. Okay, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Kaitana Uditanya, Besula, Ein Besula Ella Naira. That Besula Davka means Naira, so when it says that a Kohen Gadol needs to marry Besula, V'cheinu Omer V'Naira Tovas Maira Besula. That it says by, who is that? By Rivka? It says that she was very beautiful, she was a Naira, and she was a Besula, so Besula means Naira, but not a Katana. We had said that Rabbi Elazar's opinion is that if you have an unmarried man who sleeps with an unmarried woman, so then she becomes a zona, says Rav Amram, that we do not paskin that way. And now we get up to a very interesting Mishnah about the mitzvah of Puravu. Says the Mishnah, so a fellow can only be mevatel from having children if he already has children. Beishami Omim says Beishami Shnei Zchorim, Beisil Omim Zochor Nekeva Shnemer Zochor Nekeva B'Rom. Beishami says you have to have 2 male children. I think I'm always going to explain why. And Beisil says that in order to be Mekayim the mitzvah of Puravu, you have to have 1 Yingol and 1 Maidel. You have to have 1 boy and 1 girl. As the pasuk says that the Eibishter made them male and female. Says the Gemara, Hayesh Lo Banim Mipiri V'Rivya Batu Meish Lo Batu. The implication says that a fellow after he's already Mekayim the mitzvah of Puravu, whether it's going to be Shami, whether it's going to be Sil, at that point he could be Mavatal from Puravu. He's already Mekayim the mitzvah, he doesn't have to have any more children, but Me'ishalo Batu, we want to infer that means, but he still has to have a wife. This supports Rav Nachman, the name Shmuel de Omar, even though a fellow may have many children, he can't be without a wife. He needs to have a wife. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, it's not good for a fellow to be alone. That those who say Hayesh Lo Banim Batum period review that those who say no, Taka means that if he has children, then Zeu, he doesn't need to have more children, he doesn't need to have a wife. He can go and do whatever he wants. Well, meaning he can go and not have any more children and also not have a wife. So let's say it's Taka Kashan of Nachman Omer Shmuel, who says that the person shouldn't be without a wife. And here we're saying if he's ready to become the mitzvah, he could be without a wife. Lo. Ein lo bonim no se isha bas bonim. Yesh lo bonim no se isha de la bas bonim. No, what it means is that, no, if he already has children, all it means is that, no, he needs to, right? Rav Nachman Omer Shmuel says that a fellow should always have a wife. Now, what about if we want to infer from our Mishnah that if you're already Mekayim the mitzvah Puravu, then you don't need to have more children and you also don't need to have a wife? No, you need to have a wife, but you don't necessarily need to have a wife that's capable of having children. You're already Mekayim the mitzvah Puravu. For example, do you have to sell a Sefer Torah in order to be able to raise money, to be able to get married to a woman that is capable of bearing children? So if you're already Mekayim the mitzvah of Puravu, so no, you don't need to. So you can just marry a woman even if she's unable to bear children. Friends, that was Daf Samach Aleph of Masechta Yevamos. We learned about a lot of stuff. We saw machlokas between Reb Shimon and the Chachamim about our Ovdei Kochavim Mitame Ba'oil. Reb Shimon says no. The Chachamim say yes. We then also said that now that only applies to Tumas oil, but Tumas Mago Umasa would be shaykh to Ovdei Kochavim as well. We learned that a Kohen Gadol who betrothed, right, a Kohen who betroths a widow and then he becomes the Kohen Gadol, so he can get married nonetheless, but that only applies to sort of Kiddushin. It does not apply to Yibum. In the case of Yibum, they would do Chalitza. We talked about a Kohen Gadol whose brother passes away, so he dafka does Chalitza, he does not do Yibum. Then we kind of started segueing into the mitzvah of having children, of Puravu. Right, the Mishnah had said that if a fellow hasn't had children yet, so then he should not marry an Ilonis, because an Ilonis is unable to have children, and he has a mitzvah to Mekayim about having children. We saw a Bryce with Rabbi Eliezer who says that a Kohen cannot marry a Ketana. We gave a few different explanations for why that would be. Rava's explanation was, first you have Rabbah who wanted to say that, he holds like Rabbi Meir, who's Choshesh Lemiut, that maybe this Ketana might end up being an Ilonis, and also he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says, and a Kohen cannot be married to an Ilonis because he would be considered a Zona. Ravada Bar Ahava said that it's talking about a Kohen Gadol, and Ketana isn't technically married, although Rava says that doesn't really make much sense. And Rava says it's talking about a regular Kohen, and I'm concerned that maybe she'll be seduced. Rav Papa and Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak both say that it's talking about a Kohen Gadol, but that he dafka needs to marry a Nara and not a Ketana. Okay, fine. And then we saw the machlokas between Beishami and Beis Hillel about the mitzvah of Pura Revu. Beishami says you're mekayim the mitzvah of Pura Revu with 2 boys, and Beis Hillel says that you're mekayim the mitzvah of Pura Revu with 1 yingel and 1 maidol, with 1 boy and 1 girl. Friends, that was Daf Samach Aleph of Masechta Yevamos. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.